All right, everyone, let's get underway. Scott, you had a last sip of coffee there. My daughter's lunch is taken care of, as I'm sure, and I hope your kids are too. So, like any remote learning and sharing situation, we're all at home today, and you may see a child of ours wander through the screen, as I'm sure you're all dealing with as well. So, welcome to the first of what we think will be many office hours. These are meant to be open office hour times to really talk about ways that you can use Listenwise remotely in your classroom. And we're going to be relying heavily on you and your questions and to help you work through this difficult, challenging time to engage your middle and high school students. So first of all, let me just say I'm Monica Brady-Myerov. I'm the founder and CEO of Listenwise, and I come from a background of public radio. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Scott Petri. He's a 10th and 11th grade history teacher out in California. So as I said, today we're going to talk a little bit about how to access Listenwise in a remote setting, how to use it, some really fast, easy tips, as well as a lot of stories from Scott in his classroom that he'll share, and even how to activate student-led learning, because when you're with middle and high schoolers, you want them to be exploring on their own and driving some of their own learning. And then we'll have plenty of time for reflections and questions throughout this. So as I said, this is an open office hours, and we want you to be sharing and asking questions in the chat box throughout, and we'll be checking in on that throughout the next 30 minutes. So first, the nuts and bolts. So if you're not already familiar with Listenwise, I thought I'd just give you a quick overview and say that we are a fully digital listening skills building curriculum. We have more than 2,000 podcasts and public radio, and we have the teaching resources built around this so that you can access it in your class and digitally and make assignments digitally. You can sign up for free if you haven't already done that. We are free for the entire platform during the school closures at listenwise.com. And then there's some things, just basics you should do to get yourself and your students on the platform, such as creating classes, enrolling students, and that'll also show you how to make assignments and quizzes. We'll be going over that some as we jump to the platform, but on this page, I gave you video links to how to do each of these things. And you'll be receiving this presentation as well as a recording of this presentation so you can refer back to it. All right, first, let's just talk about how to get Listenwise remotely. Again, some basics. Listenwise is fully digital, so your students can access it on a desktop, laptop, Chromebook, or mobile device. Let's just spend a minute on the mobile device because I believe that a lot of middle schoolers and especially high schoolers have devices. And in this time where you're trying to do remote learning for a variety of students with a variety of accessibility for technology, the mobile device can be a friend in this. And know that Listenwise is HTML5. It's not an app. It is a web browser, so they are using some data, but it's easy to use and looks great on a phone. It also integrates really well with Google Classroom. So again, I'm thinking about how you're trying to quickly and easily integrate something that's either new to you, or maybe you are already a subscriber to Listenwise but haven't done a lot of online digital assignments. Use Google Classroom. It's so easy to import your roster, share assignments, great integration, super, super easy. And then you just get access to this huge content of more than 2,000 nonfiction podcasts. And again, thinking about that mobile device, also it takes up less bandwidth. So for those students who that's an issue, audio is so much easier to access than video. So a couple just easy ways to get at it. And now let's talk a little bit more about how to use it in a remote setting. And for this, I'm going to give you first a quick start idea, and then I'm going to turn it over to Scott to share some of what he's been doing. But one of the easy ways to do is get everybody to...
You okay?
I'm just going to ask everybody to mute so we can hear well. Thanks. So remote learning, we know, is new to a lot of you, and you don't need to do everything at once. So this suggestion is an easy way to get engagement on a story and quickly share it out with your students. Every story piece of audio on Listenwise has a share audio button that you see down on the right-hand corner here, and that pops up this link. And you can copy that link into an email, a Google Doc, however you want to do it, and the students can just click on that link and hear it. They don't need to have classes. They don't need to be registered with the site. They just can call it up on their phone and listen to it. So if you want to bypass all the registration part of it and arranging your classes, and you just want to send your kids something cool to listen to, this is a great option. But it is a really great way to listen to the audio really quickly with your students. All right, Scott, I'm going to pass it to you now because I want to hear how you've been using Listenwise with your history students. And I'm going to jump to the website now too and show how that's, what it looks like as you're speaking.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I'm a social studies teacher, and naturally I'm drawn to the social studies content more so than the current events. But regardless of what unit I'm teaching, I really want to bring students through three, types of learning. The first is building content knowledge. The second is applying, practicing, and creating with that content knowledge. And then the third piece is where they demonstrate that content knowledge. And I like to think of Listenwise as an essential piece for the building content knowledge. And so what I usually do is I look for whatever unit I'm going to study. So in this, I would just go to the search bar and I would type in the Cold War. And I would get a whole bunch of stories on the Cold War, and they're organized. And here's where, Monica, you might want to show the icons where there are some self-graded quizzes that have the little checkbox, right? And then there are others that have discussion questions embedded in. And I like to have a variety of these in the remote learning experience because I think it's boring for the students if they just have to do 5 Listenwise stories and 5 quizzes. So sometimes I have them writing the answers to their questions. Sometimes I do that in a class discussion board so everybody in the class can see it. Sometimes I do it on a flip grid where I'll list the comprehension questions and the discussion questions, and I'll say choose one and answer it in flip grid. And that shows me that 1, students are listening to the content, and 2, they understand it. So I just kind of wanted to give everybody a chance to look at everything Listenwise has to offer when it comes to searching for standards-based or standards-aligned content.
Yeah, let me show that a little more in depth, Scott, because I'm going to go back to that advanced search bar. And that's such a good point. I feel like on Listenwise, search is your friend. You want to quickly find topics that relate to what you're teaching, or you want to maybe even browse by standards, which you can do on the far right of the screen. You can click Browse by Standards if you need to address a particular standard. If you don't, you should be browsing by either the content that you want to teach, or maybe it's narrowing it down to middle and high school and choosing an audio Lexile level that's good for you. So just a moment on these, because I think this is another great thing to understand. These are brand new on our site. We're the only ones that have this new Lexile audio measure. And what it is it's a reliable third-party measure of the difficulty of the audio. So it's not a measure of student listening, it's a measure of the complexity of the audio. And we have categorized it into 3 different levels.
About. Also, I don't speak Spanish. I don't really speak Spanish either. I'm only speaking English. Like, for instance,
here's somebody
muted.
Because everyone can understand Homelita teaching.
Unmuted.
So I know that some people are like, I don't want to call because of that. And that shouldn't really be a barrier.
Speaking and see if I can mute them. Just going through to mute everyone so we can hear. Okay, so back to the audio measures. So here are some recommendations by grade levels as well as listening levels by just low, medium, and high. So that's one way you can screen for content. And then you can screen whether you want to have an auto-scored multiple choice quiz or not. whether you want it to be a lesson or a current event. All of these features are ways that you can narrow down what you're teaching to refine your search. Now, one thing to remember is that your search is this categorization that I've made on the search, remember the next time that I do it. So I have to think, okay, next time I want to include current events, and I am also searching for English language arts. So when I make that revised search mechanism, just make sure you go back and change what you'd like to see on the search. So I know, Scott, you were talking to me about how you just wrapped up a World War II unit, and you like to use sometimes Listenwise to just reinforce some knowledge, right? Tell me what stories you've used, and we can go deeper.
So first, I wanted to kind of add one point about the beauty of the multiple choice quizzes and the feedback that it gives for the students is over time. And so far in my first semester, my fall semester, I assigned over 20 Listenwise quizzes to my high school students. And what that does, you can see in your reports, it develops a pretty robust user profile, and you can track what your students are doing when it comes to identifying the main idea, understanding vocabulary, being able to summarize, being able to detect inferences. And over time, I can use that data to pinpoint what weaknesses my individual students have and how to help them improve in that skill. And the other thing we've noticed here in California, where we actually test listening on our SBAC, is that Listenwise is really highly aligned to the skills that are tested on the SBAC. And over time, you can give students direct instruction in those skills. So hold on one second. I have to boot up my Listenwise dashboard so I can tell what stories I used for.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm just going to comment that the quizzes are, as Scott pointed out, are aligned to the SBAC and are great practice for that. But we know that right now that's not your biggest concern. Testing has been put on hold. You're just trying to find some things that work in a remote setting. And quizzes and the way we assign quizzes is so easy to do. And then you can track whether the student completed them and how they did overall in this really simple view of the class, of their reporting, which is under classes. And it's right here to see the class summary report. Now, as I said, you do need to have your students registered and in your class to be able to assign them a quiz. But once you've done that once and the students are in the class, it's super easy for them to take the quiz without any problems. So let me just show you another quiz. As I walked you through it just a moment ago, the assign a quiz is right there. You can assign it with or without the transcript, and that will help your students, whether they're practicing on literacy-based strategies that allow you to read along it as you listen, or just listen and launch the quiz. And then as I showed you, the students get an immediate response as to how they did. They see what they got right, they see what they got wrong. So again, in a remote setting, that is really valuable because your time is limited to give them feedback, and they will know right away how well they listened. So that's another great feature of that. The other thing I just wanted to point out too is that every story, as you probably noticed, has transcript, interactive transcript with the audio. Now, for your students who are struggling readers or English language learners, this is a great feature that is research proven to improve literacy. So I'll just play a little bit of this one.
It happens every week in my household. My kids hunt me down, hold out their palms, and ask, may I please get my allowance? They are supposed to do regular chores.
So as you see, the story stays in sync with the audio, and you can also have the ability to slow it down by 20%. Again, when you assign this, either in a quiz or when you create an assignment, which I'll show you a bit later, you have the choice of whether or not you want your students to see that transcript. So that's another great just literacy approach and a way for them to be practicing listening and reading at the same time.
So I'd like to jump back in here because I want to talk about one thing I've done when it comes to grading in my grade book. In our district, we're limited to the percent homework and influences a child's grade. And I have completely bypassed that by making my grading categories reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So I can give the students, like I said, I gave the students 20 quizzes on Listenwise in the fall. And what I did is I sort of aggregated those grades and assigned them what they had actually earned. And so what you can see as your students take these quizzes is their scores start going up the more the quizzes mean to their actual grade. For example, the first few quizzes, the scores were pretty low, like maybe in the 60 percentile. But then as the semester has gone on, I have more and more kids that are getting 100% on these Listenwise quizzes. And I just booted up my dashboard, and I'm looking at, for the World War II unit, which was half online after we stopped teaching in brick and mortar locations and half in the brick and mortar location. I gave them seven Listenwise discussion questions. And the stories were: a veteran remembers Pearl Harbor, memories from Japanese internment, the creative act of coping in Japanese internment, the artists of deception, the Ghost War Army of World War II, D-Day memory, women on D-Day, and Hiroshima's legacy of doubt. And those directly corresponded to Common Lit reading assignments that I also tag teamed. And so when it came to our online learning, it was a lot easier for my students because I was using the same two platforms that we've been using all year. They've had Listenwise as classwork and homework since August. They've had at least one Common Lit as homework every week, not every week, but maybe 2 a month on a regular basis. So when he shifted to that online learning, I just basically told them, if you do all the Listenwise, I'll give you a C. If you do the Listenwise and the Common Lits, I'll give you a B. If you do the Listenwise Common Lits and the video lectures, I'll give you an A. And I've subsequently added on a reading task because I found a book that they could all read online for free. And so they're reading Hiroshima to go along with this. And since I teach at a medical themed school, they have to write medical histories of 2 of the people that the book follows and detail their radiation sickness. So this Listenwise and Common Lit, I kind of think of them as appetizers when it comes to building the content knowledge. And then my students also had video lectures that they could use to help apply and practice, because now they have 3 different sources that are all talking about the same thing. What connections do you see? And what can you corroborate? What do you think is most likely to be true? So they can go a little deeper with these multiple sources. And then for the demonstration piece, they're just creating their own study guide based off the book Hiroshima.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Scott. And I want to answer a couple of the questions that have popped in the chat box. So thanks everyone for putting them in there. And that is that the students do only need to enter your classroom once with the code. So it's really easy. If you're not doing the Google integration, it's easy for you to give the code to the students once to enter. There are no limits on the numbers of quizzes you can give students, and students have the choice to slow down the audio or not, either in a quiz or if you're creating a written assignment. So let's look a little closely at this, one of the stories that Scott was mentioning about Japanese internment. And I want you to notice that here below are the bars, and these are the assignment resources you can assign online to your students, as well as a full teacher's guide that walks you through a lesson. So all of the stories have a bank of listening comprehension questions and discussion theme questions for you. They're basically done for you. They're built on Bloom's taxonomy, and they're easy for you to assign. Also, we've spelled out the vocabulary and give you at least 2 listening organizers that can be assigned online. So this one is a T-chart comparing Japanese American actions to US government actions. And then all the stories have this type of chart. What this is it's really a metacognitive strategy for students to follow along with the audio. Students tick off the phrases as they hear them in the story. And then your teacher's guide gives you step-by-step instructions of how to launch this lesson. Now, honestly, in a remote setting, this is going to be more difficult to follow. This is typically what you do in class, but all of the assignment resources here are assignable right here in this Create Assignment button. So when I launch that button, it's going to give me some choices. Do I want the students to view and download the transcript? Do I want them to see the text help bar? This is it's a bar that helps students have some text read aloud and has definitions in Spanish, definitions in English and translations into Spanish. So I'm just going to do a test on this and go to the next stage. Next thing it asks you to do is choose a lesson listening organizer. I like that T-chart. And if you notice, it shows me below what the T-chart is, so I know exactly what I'm assigning. Save and go to the next step. It pre-populates all of the questions for you. And I just want to stress that this is easy for you so that you can decide, well, I really only want my students to answer one question and I want it to be in paragraph form. So I'm just going to add write one paragraph. You can change it any way you want. There is no limit in the reply box when the students do this assignment. I'm going to save and go to the next step. We have some additional materials. I might want to have them watch a video or check out an additional website. And then I'm going to give them instructions here as to how to do the assignment, and then I can assign it. This is also a really magical part of it because you can decide to only select certain students to receive this particular assignment, or you can select all of them, say the due date is on Tuesday, and then you're ready to assign to the selected students, and it's done. So if you want, I'm just review what this looks like. It's been put into my assignments tab. By clicking on this button, I'll see it. So you can see this is my view of what's happened. I can see I've assigned it to people, but nobody started. And then below, you can see the student preview. This is what your students will see. So again, there's that bar.
Shortly after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, pushing America into World War
California, Arizona.
Handsome
And the slowed audio is there too. There's that toolbar too that that allows things to be read out loud to you or defined.
After Japan attacked.
The vocabulary and the materials, it's all in one place. Students can work on it on the platform, they can save it, and then when they're ready to submit it, they're given a couple warnings that yes, it is going to you, their teacher. So make sure you're ready to submit the assignment. Scott, let me go back to you, and I know you were starting to work on the Cold War. So if you want, I'll show the Cold War guide you shared with me yesterday, and we can take a closer look at that.
Sure, pop that up. But before we move to that, I wanted to say something about the importance of staggering deadlines. When you assign one like the Japanese coping one, where the students are actually writing their answers, it's imperative that you then have to give the feedback. And you have to either say the answer is right or wrong if you're going to correct it in that depth. So stagger when you do that. You probably don't want to, as a high school teacher, assign that to all 5 periods where all 5 of them are due the same day. If you stagger the deadline so you only have to review one class at a time, it's a lot easier for your workload.
That is a great point, and I'm so glad you brought it up. And I just want to point out that you can easily update or edit assignments. So you could take that one assignment and then slightly change it or assign it to a different group of students in the class. So we
actually, and I have a great template that I use for grading this that I will put in the chat and share it with everybody. It's just a simple Google Doc template where you can write in your answers. And then I have one screen up where I'm looking at the student answers, and then the second screen where I have my cheat sheet answers. And
that's great.
That makes my life a lot easier.
I bet it does. So we do not provide answer keys in the Create Assignment toolbar. So that's what you're going to be sharing, Scott, is very, it's priceless. Thank you. Now, when you do assign a quiz, that is automatically scored and graded. So again, if you're just thinking of the level of difficulty and effort you're able to put into your tracking and grading students, just make your choices based on that because we give you a lot of options.
the quizzes rock for just that reason. And what I'm finding with this move to distance learning, where we're spending more time with spreadsheets than we are with our actual students, being able to have something automatically graded for you is really key. And all you have to do is export it to a spreadsheet and then maybe import it into your district grading program or what have you.
Yeah,
do you want to put up that
report there? Yeah, I just was showing them where the download report button is, and then you could click on a student and see all of their quizzes and how they've been doing. And then you can download that report.
And this is great for having the students do some reflection about, are their skills improving over time, or are their scores stagnating or maybe getting worse? I've done that before too.
All right, now transitioning to what's coming up for your students is Cold War, right?
Correct. So I have created this document, which I stole the format from my friend Amanda Sandoval, who's an awesome history teacher you can find on Twitter at History Sandoval. And she does these beautiful templates and beautiful slideshows. So a lot of times I like to borrow them. So this was a set of directions on the Cold War, and this, as you can see, is a joint project I'm doing with my English teachers. And what we've done is we've divided up the content. So the English teachers are going to use these 4 Listenwise. I'll use the 4 that are more history-based. And then as you scroll down, you can see I've paired some common readings with this. This whole unit is for the English teacher focused on rhetoric, and analysis, students analyzing famous speeches. So from the history perspective, bringing in some of that content of the Cold War here with Listenwise and Common Lit, and then they're going to actually watch speeches that my students did in previous years about the same things. So you can also see I use a website called 15 Minute History that has longer podcasts from the University of Texas at Austin. And you can see what my English teachers are going to do. They're going to have a little bit of more general interest on the Cold War and use Freakonomics Radio and American History Tellers. And then again, since I'm at a medical themed school, we're looking at a book study. This book is called Cold War Medical Experiments on Children. And we've developed various activities we're going to do with that book. And then it's going to come down to the final project for both this history and ELA is they have to analyze 4 speeches, and they have to pick which, in their opinion, is the greatest Cold War speech of all time. For their English teacher, they're going to write up an argument for it. For me, their history teacher, they're just going to record that on Flipgrid. We call that the 2-for-1 special. In the era of distance learning, where students are just getting bombarded with assignment after assignment after assignment, how can we combine our silos, integrate our subjects, and reduce the workload for the kids without decreasing their cognitive load? So this is our attempt to do that. I'll also send a copy of that in the chat so you can feel free to adapt it for your needs.
And I thought I'd take this opportunity to go to one of these stories because I think this Cuban Missile Crisis story is a perfect example of why listening or listening to an author who you read in ELA or listening to a scientist explain a concept is so key, because you're going to hear first-person audio in this. I'm just going to play a little bit of it so you get a sense of it. Let's just start here.
This morning, what many call the high water mark of the Cold War. 12 days in October 1962, when the world seemed poised on the brink of nuclear war. WBUR's Kelly Horan takes us inside the Kennedy White House at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
On October 16th, President Kennedy tells his brother Robert, the Attorney General, that there is great trouble. That trouble is the discovery of Soviet missile sites in Cuba. A CIA agent briefs the president.
There's a ballistic missile launch site of 2 military encampments in west central Cuba.
So just hearing those first-person accounts, those, it's so exciting, I think, for me to hear it, and I know your students will be, will love it as well. I just also wanted to point out that in this lesson, as many of our lessons do, we have something called scaffolding for English language learners. You see this up here, and it's this little bar down here, and what it does is have simplified listening comprehension questions. We tier the vocabulary further, and we also provide language objectives for your language learners. So it goes a little deeper into the language practice that's involved in this story. It also includes a close listening guide with a first, second, and third listen. So you can go even deeper with these kinds of features. And a reminder too, over here is the Lexile audio measure, and clicking on that question mark will give you a good idea of whether to choose low, medium, or high and what grade levels. But remember, your students can typically listen 2 grade levels higher than they can read. So really want you to think about challenging your students to listen to more advanced text than they might be able to read on their own. So I know we're hitting the 30-minute mark. This is open office hours, and we're open to stay a little longer if you've got questions. This was a quick review of the whole site. I'm going to take you back to current events and see if there are any last-minute questions. And Scott, I'll turn it to you to see if you want to add something at the end. Tammy just asked if you could assign scaffolding to certain students. Yes, you can. When you create an assignment, it does ask you how much scaffolding you want to provide for your students. So you could segment out a population of students who need that extra support from those who don't. And I just want to say too, in the current events, we're adding stories every single school day. And once a week, they've got a quiz with the story on Wednesdays. So this one, how new emojis are created, is a fun story that has a good quiz. And on Fridays, we always have a debate. So setting up a debate in a remote context could be really interesting. You could create this assignment, and half of your students a pro and half of your students a con, and they would all be listening to the same debate. And it would be very easy for you to do. Scott, do you have any closing thoughts?
You know what? I wanted to make sure that is my mic on?
Yes,
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, I wanted to make sure we put a link to the literacy coach's guide in there, because that's a great resource for people just getting started with Listenwise, and it has some fantastic ideas on how to do some extension activities in the classroom after the student has listened to something.
Thank you for reminding us of that. We'll pop it into the chat box, and maybe we'll even include it in a follow-up email to you. I'm just showing again the Lexile audio measure. Somebody asked in the box they'd like to see that chart again. This is a really great way to find the right level story for your students. So screening for that in the search bar is a wonderful way to look for content. I will add that when your students have an account, they have the ability to search the whole platform and select stories they want to hear. They cannot self-assign. You as the teacher need to make the assignment to them if you want to track their progress. But it is something they can have some student agency over and select stories that are interesting to them. So I think we've answered a lot of questions. We're happy to answer more, and we're going to do this again. I mean, we just want to support you with your needs and how we can help you to do learning in a remote environment, teaching and learning. So we're happy to assist you in any way, and we thank you all very much for coming. Actually, I'm just going to get on the last page of our presentation, because then that'll just give a little more information to you guys to see how you can contact me, how you can contact Scott, some other questions for technical support or feedback, any additional questions you didn't feel like you could get to. Erica at Listenwise is happy to help you. And we just really wish you all the best of luck with this. And we're thinking about you in this really challenging time. And we just want to be here to help you and help your students. Scott, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.